everyone, my name is Katharina Elleke and I'm a designer and educator in the field of plastic recycling and circular economy. I believe that nothing is waste until you waste it. And that could be a banana peel, it could be a piece of wire, it could be an empty chocolate bar or a piece of plastic. In my nature, I don't seem to want to throw things away because I always feel like there's something that you can actually use that for and some value that it has. So this curiosity and this passion to create and build things is, I guess, what led me to study industrial design. Now, as an industrial designer, you learn how to identify a problem that is around you, and now you ideate and come up with potential ideas and solutions for it, and then you start prototyping and actually building a solution for that problem. And as I partly grew up in Kenya, as part of my family moved there, I was exposed to a whole different set of very visible problems, one of them being plastic waste. So I started diving into that problem and learning a lot about it, and somehow I stuck with it for much longer than I intended for, because I got involved in these very exciting projects, Precious Plastic and the Flip Floppy Project, which I'm going to give you a brief introduction because these are really the ones that I share most of my lessons from. So other than having this shared goal of tackling plastic pollution, these two projects also share many more values, one of them being believing in the power of communities and in building on the bottom-up approach. And this is now what leads me to the topic of this session, to look into the power and the chances a bottom-up approach has when looking at tackling pollution problems or other global problems. And I think it's clear for everyone that we have quite severe problems, global problems in this world that are really affecting everyone. And who do you think would be the ones who would have the power to actually make a bigger impact and a bigger change to these issues? I think often we come to the result of thinking that should be on a political level or it should be on an industrial level, because those are the big companies or the big positions that actually have the power to influence how a whole system works. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like their focus and their main motivation is actually on social and environmental health and sustainability and actually, having a healthy system for a long run. But it's not only the top-down approach which can make a big difference. We have the evidence and now the experience from over the last couple of years especially, where people come together in big groups and actually make a big change as well. We have the Fridays for Future movement, we have other Black Lives Matter, so that's even only spreading the awareness of an issue is already something very impactful, but then going further out of that, there is a lot more that can be done. So this session is about building, empowering and engaging communities to act, to make a change, to take ownership of the pollution problem or other problems in your area in the world, rather than waiting for big guys, for the industry, for the politicians to actually make a change, because we've seen by experience that it takes them a long time. So it's better to get active and actually build a resilient structure to make a system change. So first of all, we look into how waste can be transformed into something valuable, and looking in this case on the example of plastic. Then we will have a look into the chances that we have and the opportunities we have with small-scale and low-tech solutions in comparison to the industry or as an addition to it. And finally, we'll have also a look on what heritage and culture, what role it plays into designing for newer systems, making the transition into a better and more sustainable world. So many of you might know already the plastic and how recycling works and stuff like that, but I just want to make sure everyone is kind of on a similar level to get the basics about it. So plastic is made from crude oil, which means we take it deep out of the earth. It's a finite resource, which if we use all of it, it's gone, and it's also very damaging for the planet. So once we extracted that from the earth, it goes into a refinery where it's heated and transformed into polymer chains, and that's now the base of all the plastics that we know nowadays. The first plastics have actually been created to replace natural materials like ivory because it was very inaccessible and expensive, to build something like pool balls or piano keys or something like that. Then they also found that it was electrically insulating, so they used it for telephones and electronics. Then the war came and they were like, wow, this is a good material which is really strong and can be lightweight, so they developed a lot of war equipment like parachutes, which is strong and lightweight, or things that protect you and are lightweight to carry but can't easily break. And then after war it came more into the mainstream consumption, so they were developing ways to use it for house construction, for household items. We developed clothing out of plastic fibers, and suddenly it became like a material that was all around us in every part. And then the oil and plastic industry found a perfect way for them to make sure people continue buying plastic and again and again by introducing single-use plastic. So that our plastic products are designed to be used once for a very short amount of time and then thrown away. So they have to buy them again, use them, and throw them away again. Meaning that the buying and consumption would continue, but also the throwing away. So the industry really discovered this material as a material that can be so diverse, with so many good properties that are useful in many parts of our lives. So that's a lot of very diverse, but especially a lot of stuff. And that brings us to today, where in the year of 2023, the world is producing more than 400 million tons of plastic each year. And it's not only useful stuff, like chairs and medical equipment that can be useful, but it's actually 40% of that, nearly half, is packaging. So things that are designed and used in a way that it's a very quick use and then thrown away. Now that you can imagine, and I think many of you know, ends up as a lot of waste. That is in most cases not managed very well, so it means that a lot of it ends up in the environment, in our oceans, on the beaches, in the forests. When it comes there, it starts degrading in microplastics or macroplastics. So those are now causing very visible damage and very visible pollution to our environment. You see full beaches of plastic, forests, whatever, but also in the stomachs of fish, in birds, in cows, and even whales with masses of plastic in their stomachs. So that's very visible, but it is also found in a microscopic level. So it has been found in snow, in the rain, on the highest mountain, in the deepest sea, even in our groundwater and in our drinking water. So that's now not surprising that it's in our drinking water. It also ends up in our system, in our human system. Not only by the water, but also by the food we eat. So it has been found in human blood, it has been found in the breast milk, in the placenta. So even an unborn baby nowadays mostly doesn't have a choice. It already comes to the world with plastic inside. So it's literally everywhere and doing no good. So when I'm talking about the plastic in your body, it's not only plastic particles, it's also that the fact that plastic tends to bind toxins and then releases those toxins in your system, in liquids. So those toxins now are really the ones going into tissues, into our deep system, and actually causing cancer and things like that. And a lot of those diseases are actually not yet well researched, because it's a fairly young material in our world. It's in most places less than 100 years old. But even though it's such a young material, the massive growth of it caused massive destruction and pollution in our environment. And that was actually already observed in the 1960s, where they first found plastic pollution to happen more. And back then they already started trying to find a solution, one of them being recycling. So they started recycling, which is a fairly simple process. You basically shred your material. Once you get your material, you shred it, and wash it, and then can just use the same material in the same processes as with the virgin material to create new things again. So the concept is simple, but in reality is actually not that simple, because first of all you have to make sure you can even collect your plastic, which is now spread around all over the place. The other thing is that the sorting is a big challenge, because there's many different types by now. The industry really mixes and develops all these different types, which now makes it very difficult to identify them again. And it's just a very resource-consuming process. As you see in the industry, it requires a lot, so it's just not very accessible. But despite the challenges, as more plastic pollution was happening, more people also started recycling, and also more regulations are actually put into place that recycling has to happen at a certain percentage, blah, blah, blah. So more and more recycling is happening, which is, I guess, a good thing, because it's taking out the waste from the environment. But the problem now is that in the meantime, the production also was growing. And that now explains also why today we are looking at a recycling rate of 9% only, while it was the same recycling rate years and years and years ago. Even though it has risen so much, the production is just overtaking and is too massive to actually catch up with. So I think it's quite clear that we can't recycle our way out of this. Recycling is part of a solution where you can try to get the materials that are already out there and make something beautiful and something valuable again with it. But as long as the production is growing and growing, we won't catch up with it, and it's simply not sustainable just to recycle that. So we need to reduce the production, and we need to use alternatives that are already there or can be developed and are being developed. And we just need to reuse all the stuff that we already have around. There's a lot of resources. Even if we stop producing today, there's still enough to actually recycle for quite a long time. So it needs a full systems approach. It needs to go from the linear take, make, throw to the circular economy, where everything is designed in a way that it can be used as long as possible, that it's a valuable thing, and that in case it breaks, it can be repaired and remanufactured, and then in the very last resort, recycled, so that it goes back into a system. So I think it's clear that recycling is not the one and only solution to the plastic pollution. We need to reduce the amount that we're producing, and we need to use alternatives that are already there or can be developed, and reuse just whatever we have around. So it needs this full system approach to now go from a linear take, make, throw to a circular economy, where everything is designed and made in a way, that it can be used for as long as possible, that it has value, that it doesn't create waste in production, and that if something breaks, it can be reused in another way or repaired, remanufactured. And in the very last resort, we recycled. So how do we now work towards such a full systems approach? And how do we work with these masses of problems, masses of plastic and other things and other issues? And why do we build on small-scale solutions and community-based solutions instead of relying on the big guys in the industry who might have much more capacity to actually make an impact? So first of all, maybe look at the industry around you. If you're a city, maybe there's some industrial area, but it might be that there is actually no industry really around you if you're in a village. Do you know where your waste, for example, ends up? Do you know where there is industry which is producing something on a bigger scale? And have you been there? Have you seen it? Do you know how accessible it is? Because in most cases, you will see that the industry is like massive facilities where usually not very accessible for people like you and me who don't work in there. Usually outside of the city even, so that people don't really see it. So it's a very closed thing, and it's also the resources that we will need for it. It requires a lot of skills, a lot of budget, a lot of space, a lot of resources. It's simply not accessible, and that was also one of the main reasons for precious plastic to actually develop the low-tech solutions so that it becomes more accessible, that people can start their own project and actually even learn about it, because the whole knowledge is also a very closed topic. And that now enables for recycling in this case, to end up being very decentralized. In every village, every area, it could be your neighbor who's actually the recycler and dealing with the waste, which doesn't only enable the communities to deal with their local waste, but it also now makes it more human, more close to what you do, because you might know the people, it might be close to your space, it might be your waste that you're bringing to that small-scale recycler, because everything is in a much smaller ecosystem. And by being more human, being more close to the people, it now creates a much better understanding, much better connection to what's happening there. They learn about it and actually also see what part they now play in this whole system, and might change the perspective and eventually also their behavior to contribute better to a better system, and actually deal with the waste better, but also even try to reduce the amount of waste that is being produced there, because it is a challenge. So you see how making it more accessible and more decentralized doesn't only allow more recycling to actually happen and dealing more with the waste, but also dramatically changes the mindset of the people who are seeing it, who are understanding it, and who are engaged with it. And also with the precious plastic small-scale machines, the beauty is that it's very tangible, very hands-on. So even children get to know the process, and it's something, if you get involved with it in that way, it's a whole different excitement and motivation to make change. Another big difference from the industry to small-scale recycling or production is the type of products you're producing. The industry is set up to produce masses of products of the same design in a short amount of time with a very efficient use of resources, so that in a day you're producing thousands or hundreds of thousands of the same products, with the goal of selling them for a very cheap price and making them as affordable as possible for a lot of people. And that has its benefits for society, I would say, because there's products that are used in construction or in medical care, or areas where it's really important that it's affordable for the people to actually build or build up their health system. But in reality, the problem is that in the industry, not only those useful products are being produced, is, as we learned, about 40%, which is actually just being produced into things like yogurt pots, something that you have that they produce hundreds and thousands of a day, and then they're meant to be used once and thrown away. That's now what the industry, as we know it nowadays, is set up for these very cheap mass production of things, which many of them are just being thrown away. Now, imagine you are a small-scale recycler and you use your machines, your electricity, your manual power to probably produce just something like 100 pieces a day. Would you make something like a yogurt pot or something else that can be sold for cheap, or you want to sell it for cheap and then people throw it away? Probably not, because you couldn't even afford to make something like this, as the amount of effort and time and resources you put into one thing is much more worth than you can sell it than selling it for a cheap price. So that means you won't want to make something that people throw away, and you can't afford to, because if people pay a higher price for it, they don't want to pay something that they only use for a very short amount of time. So you probably end up more thinking of something valuable, long-lasting, something like this screwdriver set that is really useful and is meant to be used for probably generations and longer. Or a doorknob, which is really beautiful and can be on your cupboard or other things, meant to be used for long. So as you're putting all these resources into these products, you are going to really consider what value and what duration and sustainability those products should have. and also your customers that pay more for them would want them to really stay in their lives for a longer time. So by default, by having a small-scale production, by the amount of things that you can create and the amount of effort you put into it, you are striving for less waste and a more long-lasting and sustainable product, because that's what the material is worth. And not only that makes it valuable, but also the story behind it, because if you're a small-scale recycler with your small community around you, usually they know the story of the waste, how it ends up as this product, and also the amount of effort that is in it. So they know the story behind it and know how to appreciate that itself. And now, just to name one more of the great potential of this small-scale and low-tech recycling is the ability to prototype and to test new things. So in the industry, if you imagine, you have like a big setup, big machines, which if you turn them on for a few minutes, there's already a couple of kilos running through it without really being to influence that. Those big machines, those big molds, they cost a lot, and running them for even just a few minutes is very expensive. So the industry, again, is set up in a way that you make the most out of every minute that you produce in that. So you can't now start playing around with molds that you don't know how they turn out, or with some plastic types where you're not exactly sure where they come from, how they behave in your machine, and just testing new techniques. You won't do that because you're risking too much the productivity and also maybe damaging your whole setup and machines. And it's very expensive. While in the smaller machines, that's now what is really easy. You have a small quantity that you can just test for one test, and that's how, for example, you can test ocean plastic and see how does that behave. Does it make a good product? And even if you just used a couple of grams and realize, oh, that doesn't work, you can easily say, okay, this doesn't work. It didn't harm my machines or molds much, but now I can easily go on to the next test. So you are capable of trying different things, dealing with different situations, coming up with new iterations also of your products, because they can be improved mostly. But the industry doesn't do that because it's very expensive. In the small scale, you have that chance, and that now creates more innovation, more creativity around it, and more improvement of all the little products that can be made. And that means that the speed of trying something new and innovate is much faster and easier. While if you try to introduce a new mold into an industry, that comes with a long process of testing in a small scale actually, to then introduce it in the industry. So one really cool showcase and story that I like to tell here about the precious plastic community in this context is when the coronavirus broke out in 2020. Of course, there was a lot more ill people, they got sick, they needed to go to hospitals. So hospitals really struggled with the amount of patients that they got in a very short amount of time. So they weren't prepared with all of their PPE, the personal protective equipment. And now we're reaching out to fab labs or other maker spaces and spaces where they had 3D printers to help them produce face shields and other equipment for their PPE for their hospitals. That took quite a long time because 3D printing is quite a long process. But then the precious plastic community, people in the community slowly started coming up with ideas to make molds for PPE equipment using the precious plastic injection machines. And that's where we saw in the precious plastic community people coming up with ideas to make PPE equipment with the precious plastic machines. So we saw that and made a call for everyone in the community to contribute with their ideas and with their designs, so that we could gather this pool of open source designs that can be shared with everyone, now enabling people all over the world with those precious plastic machines to help their local healthcare system with the PPE. And that worked really well. After a couple of weeks, we had face masks molds, we had face shield molds, we had no-touch tools for opening doors, and so we had a variety of different really needed needed items where we asked them to make a how-to, so really documented, that people can step-by-step learn it and get the file for the mold. And we ended up with this database of really useful items and molds that other people all over the world could help and implement it. That shows, first of all, the power of distributed design and open source, how when you have a global problem and everyone is trying to think of a solution for the same problem, it really helps if those people who have the skills and can come up with a design quicker and share that, how it helps everyone else to also have the solution in a quick way. And that combined with this worldwide network of small-scale recyclers who all have the machines based on the same design, so when somebody comes up with a mold design, it fits to all the other injection machines, for example. So that enabled then everyone to actually just plug it into their machine and start producing. And what amazes me about this example is really the speed, how quick those solutions were brought together, and is really the speed of how quickly designs were brought together, and also actually having the comparison between 3D printing and injection molding, which injection molding is much faster and they could have a much higher output than the 3D printing. So to summarize a bit, the industry has its place and its benefits to society by finding efficient ways to produce useful and really needed items in a massive scale that can now allow them to distribute them for a cheaper and more affordable way, especially for things that are really needed. But it also results in a lot of waste because of the type of objects they are creating, while small-scale production now has a much bigger impact and can contribute much more to a system change, to perspective change, because of its decentralized way of working and its close and how close it is to you and to the community, changing their perspectives, changing their behaviors and involving them into the process. And also just creating less waste by the nature of products that you're creating because of the effort that is spent on it. So really taking out most value out of those, out of the effort put into it. And by creating more precious materials, which ends up in less waste. And now talking about precious and beautiful products, now we come to talk about the role that heritage and culture plays in the design and making of things to engage communities for change. So when you start thinking of what can I design for and create for a specific context or for a specific community, or just in general to kind of make change and come up with something good, a good solution, it can be really helpful to have this open source pool of ideas and designs from all parts of the world, of people from all the sorts of contexts, putting their idea out and sharing the technique, how they did it. So with the precious plastic how-tos, for example, or just the forums and exchange in the social media, seeing what other people do is already such a big pool of inspiration and innovation that can help you now to come up with your solution. But in reality, every person and every community is different. So they have their different culture, their different heritage, their different ways of thinking, their different routines and habits, their different tools that they are using and things that they are using. So if you copy a really cool design from somewhere in Mexico, it might be a really cool idea, but it might not work here in Kenya or in Asia. So that's where it's really crucial to learn from different contexts and understand them and then adapt to what is needed locally. So it's really important to look at local needs and specific contexts. And precious plastic in the community, we do that by trying to exchange and asking for each other's experiences. We also often, that's also why we have the how-tos and we have our chats in Discord, where people are able to actually exchange within their country, so they have a little bit more the relevant context. But we also go a step further, calling our most active people, learning from their situations, paying them visits, and even making projects in different countries to really learn what is the local situation, and that whatever we learn in those exchanges we can now bring back into our pool of learnings and knowledge and accommodate those learnings into newer designs and into new upgrades of what we are doing and building for the community again. So that's enough to get an idea about different challenges and differences in different countries and contexts. But the really deep dive and deep understanding of a context and of a community can only happen from the individual workspaces and communities. And as the Flip Floppy Project is really working in one area, there we were allowed to really dive into this community and into the local values and heritage and design our solutions rooted in this culture. And this power of connecting to the heritage and local culture is something that we really experienced with the Flip Floppy Project. Because we built a traditional sailing dhow, a dhow which is a boat that is very common in this area of Lamu Islands here, where the boat was built. So people here know this type of boat. They grow up sailing on it, grow up fishing with it, growing up seeing it built or even helping to build it. So it's something that is part of their DNA and that they feel very comfortable with. So when thinking about building a boat out of recycled plastic, it could have been any boat. It could have been a newer shape, European boat, or like a very new design. But that would have been a complete stranger to the people here, and they would have just thought it's not part of their community, it's something else, it's a stranger. But seeing this shape and knowing that this boat looks exactly like their own culture and heritage and the thing that they are used to, but just with a slight difference, with some different colors and some different parts that look a bit different, made them now be more curious because it's so close to their heritage, and made them feel like, oh, this is something I actually already know. So when now hearing and knowing that it's actually even built here from their own people and from their own plastic waste, is something that created even more ownership and more connection and allowed them to easier accept this as part of their own heritage and basically newer culture now, as an addition to what they already know. So for local boat builders, for local fundis as we call them here, people who make stuff, this was something opening their eyes even more because it's something so close to their homes, to what they know. So it's easier to adapt to that now. So catching the people where they are interested, where they feel comfortable with what they see and what they already know, makes it easier to now start discussing, start having conversations and involving them in the process, because the local boat builders were easy to involve because they knew their craft. It was just a different material that they were working with the same techniques. And that allowed us to really get the trust and get the confidence of local people and the local community to get started and getting involved into this movement. So, in the same way as we're doing it with boat building, we also, as we work with boat builders and carpenters, and Lamu has this very traditional carpentry furniture here, we started introducing our recycled plastic lumber into the carpentry, now handing over this newer material to the local carpenters, carvers, weavers, who know exactly those designs and can basically do them while they're sleeping. And introducing now this new technology, new material, new way of working worked so well because they felt very comfortable with the designs that they were working on, because they know them already from a long time ago. So it was easy for them to get engaged with the process, learning about this new material and learning how to work with it, building the same designs just with another type of material is something that they are very proud of now, because they know their skills and they know that they add now new purpose to the thing that they already know. It's something they can very easily adapt to and now also spread the word about it. And so that just shows again how heritage and using something that is already there, that people feel comfortable with, that people know already from a long time ago, it helps to combine that with now something that is a change of the system and a slightly newer way of doing things, because they feel more comfortable with it. So heritage and culture helps new technology, newer ways to be adapted, to be accepted, to be engaged with. But in the same way, we observe that it also helps to actually use this newer technology to preserve this heritage, because heritage is dying out in many areas. The younger generation, they are not so interested anymore to spend a lot of time carving or weaving or things like that. They are more interested into newer technology, computers, 3D printing, CNC cutting and things like that. So actually combining that now in our course that we just started and basically trialing now, which is heritage boat building with recycled plastic, there is so much more new interest now into the older technologies, older heritage and skills as well, because of being together in combination with the newer technology. So it just shows how this combination can be so strong, helping using heritage to adapt to newer technologies in newer ways and to a hopefully more sustainable approach, while using the technology to actually preserve that heritage, which is also partly helping for resilience, because if you forget how to use to do things without technology, you'll be lost if there is no electricity one day or your technology is failing. So it also now builds this resilience to know both worlds and being able to work with, to have the full setup and the full capacity to work with any situation. Okay, I think we're at a point where we can wrap up a bit. So I hope that everyone learned that plastic is somehow great. It has many amazing properties, but the way we use it is not so great, because it ends up as a lot of pollution, and we are really at a state where things need to change because we are already behind with our actions. And recycling is also amazing. You can do incredibly nice, strong and beautiful objects with it, but it's not the only solution, because again, it's not keeping up, it's not catching up with the amount of stuff that we are actually producing. So it can't be the only thing. And it needs this full system approach. It needs everyone to work towards a circular economy and circular system. And small scale and low tech solutions are not only contributing to that by making the recycling technologies and production more accessible to all corners of the world, but also by being closer to the people and now involving and engaging the communities more and really taking ownership of their own waste and in their own area. And actually to not see too black and white between the industry and the small scale, the industry can also adapt a little bit more and actually involve the community, be closer to the communities, and also start producing more valuable things and designing in a way that it's meant to be, not meant to be thrown away. So it doesn't have to be either or. The industry can and has to change to be part of that circular system. And using heritage and the local culture is now the tool to really make sure that transition can go smoothly, and that the heritage can be used for helping the newer technology, newer system changes to be accepted by the community and to be more stable as it's rooted in the heritage, while the technology also now helps the heritage to actually be preserved and make people more resilient, to really be together and not lose their background and where they come from, while going forward into a new system. So I hope that sums it up, but of course feel free to make your own summary and your own learnings of it. And now I think it's time for your little reflection and your task. So I would invite you to think about your culture, your heritage, Think about your community, your family, something that is heritage and culture for you. Now, think about the kind of products you use, the rituals you have, any tools you use, or just anything that makes your heritage and culture what it is. And now see how is it made, and maybe there's a way you can introduce a new technology, newer approach to it, maybe a more sustainable approach, a more circular approach, and see how you can use this part of your heritage to engage and inspire your community to rethink a little bit about waste and about wasting resources generally, to see how can you maybe use that to inspire them to a more circular approach and a better change of our system we live in. So yeah, maybe you come up with a good design. Feel free to document that, of course, share it with everyone so other people can actually contribute to that. And if you even come up with something that you make and that you actually start making and manage to do so, make sure to document it and make a how-to of it so that everyone can learn and get inspired from your solution.